Congressman Lamborn, thank you for joining me today. This is a very important issue we're talking about with Israel facing attacks from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists the last week since Monday. You've released a statement on this. Could you give us your reaction since you've released that and since things have continued? Now there's been almost 2,000 rockets fired into civilians in Israel. So could you please give us your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's despicable what Hamas is doing. They are raining missiles down upon innocent civilians. Israel is trying to take a measured response to the leadership who's responsible for this, or the places where the rockets are being launched from. And if it's a building that people might be living in, they're giving notice to the people ahead of time that they're going to seek to destroy that building. So it's a whole different way of operating compared to the terrorism that Hamas is doing.
Right, and you're very much aware of this. You were the sponsor of the Taylor Force Act, which conditioned U.S. aid to the Palestinian Authority on their ending of terrorist payments. I don't think that they've indicated that they would do otherwise since the Biden administration has restored funding, I think to the tune of around $235 million. So could you please tell us your thoughts on that, considering everything that's happened since that funding has restarted? Who's to blame here?
Well, besides the war crimes that we're seeing of launching missiles from what should be protected civilian spaces, and the war crime of putting those missiles into civilian areas in Israel, they are doing, like you said, pay to slay. They're giving the families or the imprisoned Hamas terrorists who have killed Israelis and Jews money while they are in prison. And the worst thing about it is the more Jews that were killed, the more money they get. And we passed the Taylor Force Act on a bipartisan basis to stop money going to the Palestinian Authority until they reform their way of doing things. They are defiant. They have not stopped doing that at all. They say that they are going to, and they have indeed continued. And yet Joe Biden and his people have turned around and are giving US taxpayer dollars now to the Palestinians. And all the while, as we've seen over the last 5 days, they are raining missiles down upon civilians and committing these war crimes.
Could you tell us a little bit about why you sponsored this bill and maybe who Taylor Force was and why you were passionate about that story?
Taylor Force was an American, not Jewish, by the way, but he was visiting Israel as I believe as part of his studies at Vanderbilt. And he was a bystander when a terrorist attack took place by a knife-wielding terrorist. Taylor Force was killed. And so we've named this act in his honor because the Palestinian Authority turns around, and we're not even talking about Hamas. Supposedly the PA is more moderate than Hamas, which I don't think I buy that. But the PA turns around and gives money to the families of terrorists, or if the terrorist is still living, to the terrorist himself while he's in prison. And it's rewarding them for terrorism. It's pay to slay, simple and pure.
So at this point in time, do you have a message for President Biden?
He should not keep giving any US taxpayer dollars to the Palestinian Authority.